Today might be the last time conditions permit strangers' afternoon sunbath on the communal balcony. The weatherman is predicting a cold front moving in this weekend. For the next few days, she will stand by the door and complain around this time, but eventually we'll both settle in for another long gray winter. Then, in the spring, when it warms up, she will have forgotten about this routine, and I'll have to coax her back outside. I'm watching her rest on her side in the last light of the afternoon when I hear the door suddenly open. I look up, expecting to see Rod, but my pulse jumps as the chatty new neighbor in 512 bursts out onto the balcony. Her little Pekingese immediately begins yapping at stranger, who takes a moment to assess the threat before casually resuming her sunbath. I can learn a lot from this cat. "Hey, hon," my neighbor says as she plops down on the other lawn chair and pulls her phone out of her pocket. I watch as it flies from her hand and crashes just inches from the edge of the balcony. Again, stranger's head rises to assess the danger before turning toward my neighbor, seemingly in search of an explanation or maybe even an apology. The woman grabs the phone as though nothing unusual has happened. "So, can I ask you something?" she says. God, she's literally got me cornered out here. Her perfume quickly dominates the space. "Okay, so why do guys ghost girls online?" Are you asking because I'm a guy?" I say, "or because I'm a ghost?" "Seriously," she says, taking a drink from a large coffee. "Why do guys do that?" When she first entered, I was considering taking a cue from stranger and just ignoring the woman and her dog. But in light of her question, which is a good one, it's probably best not to ghost her. And now that her dog is beginning to quiet down, I can almost hear myself think. I guess anonymity allows people to treat people like they're not people. I say to my neighbor, whose name I still don't know, and who is currently looking down at her phone. It even allows people to forget who they themselves are. It allows them to become something else. The internet's a Halloween mask. Stranger looks up at me. I smile back at her. At least I've got her attention, I think, as I look over at my neighbor, still buried in her phone. During our last encounter, there was no room for me to get so much as a word in, but with her distracted, it appears the tables have turned. I can talk all I want to, and so I do. I think the lack of sensory information is the problem, especially the lack of eye contact. In what's now known as the real world, you have to look someone in the eye when you hurt their feelings. You see the pain you cause in real time. This is not true in the unreal time and unreal world of the internet. But, I continue, we're probably not simulations. Or if we are, our feelings are real. Or at least they feel real. My point is, there are real people on the other side of these screens, and when we forget that and behave like robots or treat others like robots, then the robots have won. People are assholes, my neighbor says without looking up from her phone. I think I'm done with online dating. Well, your feelings are natural. Evolution has programmed the human species to communicate using a variety of nonverbal cues and pheromones. In the last few years, screens have suddenly sprouted between us. And now we're hoping that nature can find its way through this alien terrain. My neighbor's not even listening to my little TED talk. She appears to be texting. This has become socially acceptable, to be in 2 or 3 places at once. When I see a smirk emerging on her face, I have no idea which world she's responding to. Maybe she's messaging with a friend. OMG, this guy in my building is mansplaining the internet. LOL. Maybe she's right. I guess I'm just listening to myself talk to myself, as usual. In any case, I decide to keep talking. I've never thought about this, but it's as if the hidden computer algorithms of online dating have replaced the secret work of sprites and all the other superstitious forces of romance that once conspired to bring lovers together. Just then, I glimpse Hannah through the glass door behind my neighbor. She is exiting the elevator, carrying a small stack of books in her lap. I instinctively raise my hand to wave, but it's too late. She's speeding gracefully down the hall. Let's see. Even if the algorithm were perfect, I continue, most humans don't know or cannot honestly and accurately say their true nature and preferences. Nobody knows what they want, and nobody knows what they need, which is usually different from what they want. So that means that the algorithm is poorly parameterized, and therefore almost certain to fail. But it's possible that someday the algorithm will know people better than they know themselves. What's your sign? My neighbor interrupts, catching me off guard. Pisces, I say. Why? Ah, she says with a nod. That makes total sense. Of course, I'm not a Pisces, but whenever anyone asks my sign, I always pick a random answer. And then they always respond, that makes total sense. Astrology always makes total sense. And it's a good thing it does, because nothing else seems to. Yeah, you've definitely got that whole Pisces vibe going, my neighbor says. I nod. Astrological signs are like DSM disorders. They all kind of sound like me. I'm a Sagittarius, so I like Pisces, but I am done with Virgos, she says. Never again. I've noticed that the last socially acceptable form of discrimination is astrological prejudice. Stereotyping based on gender, race, or sexual orientation is frowned upon, but it's completely okay to say, I'll never date another Scorpio because they're evil, promiscuous, two-faced, jealous little bitches. Now my neighbor has gone back to looking down at her phone. So I look up at the sky. Yeah, well, I guess we can't help who we are, can we? It's written in the stars, I say, echoing a common attitude. No matter the behavior, it can always be blamed on the stars. Have you ever noticed that people become more and more like their signs? Talk about confusing the map with the territory. Maybe this astrological justification of behavior is a reaction to the problem of free will, while the enormity of possibility is agoraphobia-inducing. There's also a sense that every choice we make is predetermined by everything that makes us who we are, and in that sense, fate is out of our hands. Rationalizing behavior with irrational beliefs could also be a subconscious way to rebel against scientism and an increasingly algorithm-driven world. I guess that's what Carl Sagan meant about the information age slipping us back into superstition. More and more people seem to be consulting mystical maps, like astrology, the I Ching, and tarot cards, because despite all our various scientific navigation systems, nothing feels trustworthy. In this postmodern terrain, there is no true north. I've also noticed that the world of internet conspiracy operates, perhaps not at all coincidentally, on a similarly esoteric system of divination. The cryptocartographers follow a more paranoid pareidolia, but it still feels like a kind of substitute religion. Where once the world was full of signs from God waiting to be interpreted, the information age appears to be full of signs from malevolent forces. Elites flashing occult symbols, dollar bills containing hidden codes, and recontextualized celebrity quotes, now interpreted as winking confessions. Last night I saw a headline connecting the latest mass shooting to hidden messages found on the labels of salsa jars. It's difficult to fault people for looking for signs from the heavens or from salsa jars. It's not as if the Enlightenment has solved the big problems and led humanity towards some rationalist utopia. After all, while religion predicts the apocalypse, it's science that has facilitated the environmental crisis. It's also worth noting that since the algorithm does the work of rationalism for us, and most of that work is over our heads, our relationship to the algorithm is pretty much faith-based. We trust that the gods of algorithm understand the world better than we do. Overwhelmed by information landscapes, noisy with lies and conflicting data, some appear to be placing their trust back in their own eyes and ears. This could partly explain the flat earth conspiracy theory. If seeing is believing, then the earth is flat. I suspect the more topographical the maps of reality become, the more efforts will be made to flatten the earth. Many seem to be longing to reconnect with something deeper than the basic senses. My sense is that they're seeking the so-called sixth sense. Since the algorithm is acting as a kind of externalized prosthetic intuition and is therefore replacing the internal gut feelings provided by nature, people inherently feel vulnerable about this loss. That's my gut feeling anyway. Okay, he finally texted me back, my neighbor says with a big sigh as she stands and puts her phone in her pocket. I'm gonna go meet up with him. The woman opens the door, leading her dog into the hall. Stranger watches them leave and then looks over at me. I shrug my shoulders and smile. Seconds later, I hear the woman somewhere down the hall. Ugh, Virgos. I crouch down next to my cat, and she stares wide-eyed as I pet her and tell her how the ancient Mesopotamians sacrificed animals and interpreted their entrails to divine the future. Got any omens in there? I ask as I massage her soft, warm belly. At the conclusion of her tummy rub, Stranger rises. With a stretch and a shake, she approaches the door and looks back at me. It's rare that she decides to go inside before I do. I look through the door and see the manic Sagittarius pacing the hall. Let's wait one more minute, Stranger.